Today we'll be tearing apart a late 80s Yamaha Warrior 350. We're going to start by pulling the head off. We'll pull a starter, clutches over here, stator, magneto, flywheel, gear shifter, and then we'll split the cases. So first thing we're going to do is remove the head. We'll pull the tensioner here. We've got 8mm bolts holding that tensioner on. Go ahead and pull that tensioner here. And then we will pull that's the cam chain tensioner there. And we will pull the cam chain sprocket cover off. And we will pull the cam chain. Now you will not want to pull that cam chain sprocket without pulling the tensioner first. It will cause it to bind. 17mm to pull that cam chain sprocket. Flip that off, we'll pull the cam chain sprocket off. We're just going to go ahead and drop that cam chain down into the case because we're pulling the entire case apart, so it really doesn't matter. We will pull a couple Allens here. We've got 6mm Allens, one smaller one down here on the cylinder. Then next, after we pull these Allens, we'll pull these 14mm head bolts on top here. We've got your intake side here, we've got your exhaust side here. Bolts, and those go clear down to the crankcase, so they are long. Got the two on this side that go down into the cylinder. And then that head is ready to come off. What you do is take this intake boot off, 6mm Allen heads. And these boots have a tendency to crack on the edges here, and there'll just be a small crack, but it can cause all kinds of issues with it running. A lot of times if the four-wheeler isn't running good and your carburetor's clean, you may want to check that intake boot while you're doing that, because a lot of times that'll cause issues. So this one looks good, but we'll make sure, we'll double check everything. Intake boot, then we'll pull this head. You got cam down in there. You got your two valves, you got your intake, you got your exhaust valve. This gasket here, this is your head gasket. And obviously don't reuse that. This head's in really good condition. A lot of times there's a little bit of oil that will stay in there, so we'll set it up here and let that oil drain out. Next we'll take the cylinder off. There's a cam chain guide here. And to pull the cylinder, we've got a Allen bolt clear down here, and then that cylinder head or that cylinder block will come off. And once this bolt is out right here, you can just slide that cylinder up. Check the piston over really good. Now, if you're going to turn this piston over, or the crank over, you want to make sure and grab that cam chain out of the bottom there. If you don't, you could potentially break the case by binding that cam chain in the case down there. So you can just grab a pick, hold it up like this, and just turn it. You want to make sure that cam chain's turning with it. Flip this up now. We'll pull the starter first. Two 8mm bolts. And then this will just slip off. You can use a pry bar again, just to kind of pry in between there. There's an O-ring that'll seal this. You want to make sure that O-ring is good. And we will flip this motor up and pull the flywheel here and the stator. 17mm coil cut. Shifter here, we've got an 8mm bolt. And you can see here this chain broke at one time, broke that case. Put your oil filter cover here. Got 3 Allen, so take that oil filter cover off. Just loosen these up right now. And we'll go ahead and pull that stator cover. 8mm bolts all the way around it. And then there will be some pressure on this because that flywheel is magnetic. wiggle that out. So again, there will be pressure on it. It'll just slip out. There's your stator there, your pulser. We've got an idler gear shaft here. Here's your flywheel here. So this gear that sits down in here will go with this shaft here. This is the idler gear. Starter goes into here. This gear goes vice versa. This starter gear touches this. Flywheel one-way gear touches this. Recoil starter bolt. Put it back in there. And that is going to protect that crank when you're tightening this up. You want to make sure your flywheel doesn't spin, and that'll just pull that up. Now when you remove this, then you make sure this is seated completely down, but when you remove this, your recoil cup bolt is still on here, but that protected that flywheel puller from damaging your crank here. Most of the time there won't be that much pressure on it, but sometimes you'll get one that gets stuck. You don't want to damage that crank area. So pull the flywheel. There is your one-way starter gear. And this is a one-way starter gear bearing that'll only allow that to turn one way. If it turns both ways, you've got issues, and you'll want to replace that one-way bearing. Got your cam chain here. We'll just drop down that down in there. Pull that. We've got two 10mm bolts holding this guide on. So pull those. We've got all the cam chain parts out now. Oil filter cover. We'll also pull, there's a sensor here, an oil sensor, and then there's a sensor back up here. These cases are obviously bad because of the damage here. So pull those three. There's your oil filter there. We'll pull this wire lead off. Oil hasn't been drained out of this one, so we'll let that drain, and we'll pull this cover while we're letting that drain. 8mm bolts all the way around this clutch cover. Alright, there's a mess of those there. We'll take all these off. Here's your oil filler cap here, along with your dipstick there. Here's a gear shifter arm where the arm would be for the shift lever. In this case, you can take this arm here, pull it out, and that'll help remove that cover. And there's your clutch cover there. So you've got your clutch here, got your crank gear here, we got your balancer gear clear on top here, oil pump clear at the bottom. And we will go ahead and remove this clutch. Got 10mm bolts. Alright, all these are pulled. We'll keep all that together, keep these springs together. Now if you can see in here, there is a larger bolt there. Oh, that piece broke off there. That clutch tab broke off there at some point, so that clutch basket or that hub there is going to be no good. But we'll go ahead, that basket will still be good, basket around the outside. This plate will be good, most of the friction plates, steel plates will be good. So on this one we'll take a flat screwdriver and we'll knock this holder tab down. You want to replace this little plate here when you replace the clutch or when you do anything with the clutch, because these tabs will break off. And if that's the case, then you'll have debris down in your clutch. While we're here, we'll pull this drain plug.